What's going on YouTube? This is Ipsec, and welcome to the second video in my Customizing Parrot with Ansible video series. In this one, we're mainly going to focus around the IDE, the Integrated Development Environment, and for that, we're going to use Visual Studio Code and install a couple of plugins, the GitHub plugin and the Snyk plugin. And this video is sponsored by Snyk, so if you could just go to snyk.co/ipsec, and what this will do is it'll bring you to the Snyk website with a cookie that is of my name. So when I convince you to use Snyk later on in this video, I will get some type of credit for it. So definitely please go to snyk.co/ipsec. The link will be in the description. And I normally don't do sponsored content, but I've used Snyk in the past and this was unsponsored. I've also done a lot of just web pen testing, and at the conclusion, I always ask what like their pipeline looks like and how they generate code, and if they use any type of code analysis tools. And when they say no, I recommend Snyk, and then we go back before their fixes and they run Snyk and discover it would have found those vulnerabilities. If you don't know what Snyk is, it's a security platform that scans your code, dependencies, and containers to find vulnerabilities in your code and fix them in real time. But I think of it as more of a code analysis tool because that is my main use case for it. So with all the sponsored stuff out of the way, let's talk about why we want to use Visual Studio Code. And because I know a lot of people like using Codium, and they think of these two things as the same. And while they may look the same, they are not the same under the hood. Codium is pretty much a fork of Visual Studio Code, and they remove all the telemetry. So if I do like GitHub here, or if not GitHub, if we do Copilot, we don't have any Copilot extensions. GitHub Copilot is not here. Kind of makes sense because the whole purpose of this is not to give telemetry to Microsoft. And if you install Copilot, you're going to give telemetry to Microsoft. There's no real way around that. But the price you pay, which is telemetry, is worth it in my opinion. So let's go into installing Visual Studio Code. And we're not going to go to Microsoft's site to do this because this is a customizing your build with Ansible. So instead, I'm going to Google Ansible Visual Studio Code, and it's probably going to bring me to the Galaxy. Let's see. Visual Studio Code role. There we go. I had to add role to my thing. And it brings us to Ansible role, and this is on the Galaxy. It's not part of the built-ins, so we have to install this ourselves. If we went to galaxy.ansible.com, we could see it here. We could just run this command and it would automatically install it, but I don't like doing this for playbooks because then you just give them a bunch of things to install. But because Ansible is Python, there's a very Pythonic way to do it, and that is just to create a requirements.yml file. So if we do v requirements.yml, we can say -source and then give it the link, or not the link, but the name of the plugin. You could also, I know some people use like the -name so they know exactly what it is. But if we did this, the name is actually what gets used for the folder, which then messes with how you import it and create confusion down the line. So I would just advise you to always ignore the name and just use the -source. I'm not sure if that's like the best recommendation, but that's my recommendation, right, of my lessons learned. So once we have the requirements, we can just do an Ansible-Galaxy and then install -r requirements.yml. And then in our playbook, we will be able to utilize it, right? So if we go down on the GitHub, we can see exactly how to use it, right? We got the users, we tell it what username to install it in, and then give it extensions. So we're going to copy what they use. So we can just Control-C this. And then let's go into our main.yml. I probably should do this in a role, but like a custom role. But I'm not going to do that. We're just going to put it in here, right? So the host, we can delete this. And we give it the role Gantt sign Visual Studio Code users. This isn't going to be the vagrant user. We want to use our logged in user. So we'll do Ansible. What is it? I know you did this before. I think it's Ansible user ID, right? Ansible user. I'm pretty sure it's Ansible user ID. And this will get the logged in user of our playbook. It is important to note whenever you use this variable, if you ended up using a become, then it's going to change that user to be root. So whenever you use Ansible user ID, make sure that you use it without the become. And then for the extensions, we're going to install a couple. I don't know. I guess we could leave Jinja, but I'll get rid of it. I'm going to leave the code spell checker because, I mean, I kind of want that. But we need to install a few. And if we go to Visual Studio Code Marketplace, this is going to be how we get the extension names. So we can go here and then search for the extension we want. I'm going to say GitHub Copilot, and we're going to do this one first. I'm going to do the nightly. And then we can just grab this and paste it in. So let's just start off with Copilot nightly, and then we'll move over into Snyk. So let's do an Ansible -playbook main.yml. I probably want to do sudo who am I real quick, put a password, and then we can do the playbook. And I'm doing the sudo who am I because I do have roles before we went into the Visual Studio Code that is using apt, and apt will require root access, right? So, oh, we're also using apt in Visual Studio. We can see it right here of it installing it, right? If we did a psef-force, we can see exactly what Ansible commands look like. I'm going to do a -S so we can go left and see the lines while it works. We can see it starts, or bash will start Python, then Python starts Python, and then we go into this bash-c. It's doing this echo become success. It's doing that after it tries to become root, and if it succeeds, then it knows it's root, right? But the point I'm trying to make here is if you try to view exactly what Ansible is doing through just PS output, you're going to have a bad time because a lot of it is just dropping Python files on the disk and then executing them. And it just looks like a huge big mess, right? But now that I've killed enough time, we should have Visual Studio Code installed. So if I just type code now, we should be able to go into VS Code, and hopefully it installs the Copilot extension. We can see it wanting us to sign in to Copilot, so I'm going to click sign in, click allow, and it's going to bring me to a GitHub prompt, and I can type my username, which is ipsec, my password, which I'm not going to tell you, but we'll log in, and it wants me to use my security key. I think I have an authenticator app I can use. So let's enter the code, and we'll get logged in, and I'm going to allow this to open links. And I want to say GitHub Copilot should now be allowed. So if I go into my extensions, or not my extensions, my files, we could create a file. Let's just do new file. I'm going to do test.py. And let's see. Maybe I wasn't in a directory. So let's create a folder by clicking here, source, and create file. There we go. So with Copilot installed, I'm trying to make the font bigger. Come on, go bigger. There we go. I just did Control+. We can just say like print hello world. And Copilot will make a recommendation, which is really cool. We can say make a web request to google.com. We'll import request, do this, and print the status code, right? This is all Copilot making things. And we can say add a cookie, right? And it shows us exactly how to use cookies. So this is a good way, like I think of this as replacing kind of Stack Overflow, right? It also does Ansible well, right? So if I do file, let's open file. Where did it open to? Go to the dialog. We can do code, parent build, main.yml. We can trust this. And let's do tasks. And then name. We'll just say install the JQ package, right? and it's going to use all the syntax to install JQ. So Copilot does speed things up quite a bit when it comes to that, right? And also the IDE is nice because if I hit, let's just set a breakpoint, right? So I'm going to set a breakpoint on this print. I'm going to run this Python file. It's going to go in the terminal. And as soon as it hits our breakpoint, we can step through things, right? We can go to response. We can see everything in response. If I wanted this, if I didn't want status code, I could go over to debug, type response.text, and we can get the text of this, right? It makes it so much easier to step through code if we just do this all in an IDE. But now that hopefully I've sold you on Copilot, and I should mention that Copilot I think is $10 a month. You get the first month free, but it's something I would highly recommend paying for. Your company will probably pay for it. I pay for it out of pocket just because I find so much value in having Copilot, right? So now that we talked about this, let us move over and talk about Snyk. And let's start off by downloading some source code off a Hack the Box machine. I'm going to do it off of 2Million. So I'm going to SSH over to the box, and I already know these credentials because I have solved it. So we can just do the password, and then I'll need to go over to root. And then let's go var www HTML, and I want to grab this entire directory. So we'll do tar cjvf. I'll call it source.tarbz2, and we'll grab everything. So now on our box, we can make directory source, and we'll just wget 10.10.11.221 slash source tar bz2. We need to either edit a host file, or I can just do this, stand up a web server to download it. And then tar xjvf source.tar.bz2, and we have all the source here. So now the next step will be installing the Snyk extension. So I'm going to close out Visual Studio Code so we can install this via Ansible. And at this point, I'm going to ask you again, before you do this, please go to snyk.co/ipsec. So it adds the cookie here, and I can get credit for you installing Snyk in Visual Studio. So let's go back to our parent build, main.yaml, and we're going to add the Snyk plugin. So if we go back to the marketplace, we can go to Visual Studio Code, search for Snyk, and let's just install this. Add the vulnerability scanner, paste it in. Let's make sure we still have our sudo token, Ansible Playbook main.yaml, and it should go relatively quickly this time because it's not going to reinstall Visual Studio Code. It's just going to skip everything it's already done. So now it's checking these extensions. It just says okay because it exists. So now it paused because it is installing the Snyk plugin. And now if we open up Visual Studio Code, we will have Snyk. So I'm going to do code and then period to open my current working directory, and then where all my PHP source code is. So we should see the Snyk icon now appear here, and we'll have to trust the workspace and connect. So let's do this. It wants to authenticate. So it's going to log in. I'm going to do GitHub yet again and click authenticate. And we should be authenticated. Before we can do the cool thing, which will be like all the Snyk code scanning stuff, we will have to authorize that in the application. This is because it does send code over to them. So always make sure you have permission to do that. The open source security does not, but the open source security is just going to look at like packages you're using and like show vulnerabilities there, right? So let's do the code security and quality because this is where it actually shows all the good stuff, the stuff that you're looking for. You may be looking for the open source thing. I should say the stuff I am looking for, right? Because we know this application is vulnerable, but open source security is not going to find it. And the application itself isn't using any third-party packages. How Snyk works with PHP is it's going to use the Snyk vulnerability database upon like the composer file, which is going to list all the packages you use. I mean, Google Snyk vuln db, and it just pretty much sends the package you use to this and looks for CVEs, right? It's not actually scanning the code. So now that we've scanned the code, we can see it. Because again, we don't have any composer file, that is why open source security threw the error. We could find out by clicking to view the problem. And this is going to be the Snyk language thing. If we went to Snyk security code, we could probably see an error here. Open source security test failed for this. Could not detect supported target files. We click to follow this link, and it will show it supports PHP if you have a composer file. It supports Python if you use pip, poetry, or pipenv. So you can see how it supports for open source code finding, right? But for code security, it found a RCE and VPN controller.php. If we click that, it's going to, let's close this so it's a bit bigger. It should pull more information here. There we go. About this vulnerability. And it says unsanitized input from HTTP request body. Here, if we click, it shows where it's generating the file. And then it goes into all of these lines. And that goes into exec. And it says, I didn't see any sanitization here. And then we have a similar vulnerability being fixed in various projects. So it gives you some examples. If you click here, Firefox will open on that exact commit that shows how it affected another project and how they fixed it. So it kind of gives you some ideas on how to fix things, right? So let us take a step back and see this exact vulnerability. So it's in this regenerate user VPN function. And the thing I don't like right now is I can't see where this is being used. And that is because we don't have like PHP extensions installed. It kind of worked in Python because we installed those, but we don't have them for PHP. So I'm going to add that. And the one I like is this all-in-one PHP support. So I'm going to click here, click install. And the reason why I clicked here is so I can click on extension name up here. And we get the name in the Visual Studio Marketplace, which means we can go add this into our playbook to install this role as well. So there we go. And now if I go back to my code, it should be installed by now. Let's click here. And we can see two references. So if I click, we can see where it's being used. So this is definitely handy. But we can see the regenerate user VPN function. It is two parameters. We got the router, and then also ask for the user parameter. And if user is not specified, it will be equal to null. So here we're checking if user does not equal null. So this means regenerate user VPN was called with an argument, and then it goes to this exec. If user is null, then it's going to pull, I guess it's checking if we're logged in. How does it get username? Username's right here. Session, so it gets it from the PHP session. But more importantly, when it's grabbing it from the session, it does call this function remove special characters, which prevents it from being exploitable. So let's look at exactly how regenerate user VPN is called. I'm going to click it to see references, and we can see the two. So in this function, wherever we're at, it's calling regenerate user VPN, and there's no username specified, and that's the generate user VPN function. If we search this, so edit, find in files, search, we can see this is called from API v1 user VPN generate. So this is when a user is generating a VPN thing. So let's go back in this and search for the other one, right? So here we're specifying regenerate user VPN and specifying a username. And this is the same spot if we use Snyk and we clicked where the flow generates from, we're at the same exact code place, right? So if we look at the function, it is admin VPN. So let's do the same thing with admin VPN, find it in files, and we can see that's going to be API v1 admin VPN generate. So whenever the admin can generate a VPN, they can specify the username, which makes sense. This allows the admins to get VPNs of users, maybe to debug the VPN from their viewpoint, right? But when an admin does it, there is no sanitization. We just call regenerate user VPN and go straight to exec. And it actually looks like there's two vulnerabilities. So if I went to Snyk and we do unsanitized user input, it is also calling it out on shell exec as well, because here we have us catting and then username .ovpn. So whenever you inject code here, you're actually getting two different RCEs at the same exact time, right? So if you wanted to, I'm guessing we could put sanitization beforehand, and then it would be completely fixed. So let's start typing username, and Copilot is automatically going to recommend we use the remove special characters function that's in the VPN controller, because I guess it knows this is how we want to do sanitization, but Snyk does not seem to be happy with that. I know there is like escape shell something. Let's see. Let's go back to this and we can say escape. Is it shell command? Shell command or shell arg? Probably shell argument. Add single quotes and strings. So let's try this. And this is the benefit of the ID. We can just read exactly what this function does. And hopefully the code security piece is going to be happy with this fix, right? Because we put sanitization before it calls regenerate user and shell exec. And there we go. We haven't found any vulnerabilities. So we have successfully remediated that. No configuration things. Let's go into code quality and see what it thinks about this. We have a lot of just unreachable code, right? So if we wanted to clean this up, we could look at exactly how this is done. And I'm guessing no example fixes. Let's see. I guess they don't have examples for fixing this. But if we look, we can kind of understand what's happening. It says this is unreachable code. And the reason why is because just before the exit, we have a return. So it's never going to hit this line. So if we just removed these exits because there is a return there, then we can start beginning to clean up the code, right? So we see VPN controller has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. I bet if I save this file and it reruns this, there's going to be less than 9. We didn't clean them all up. So if we really wanted to, we'd have to go through and remove all these exits. But you should get the point on just using this to help clean up your code, right? So definitely recommend using this. We see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So we did remove some. Doing it again, but again, please go to snyk.co/ipsec or click the link below before you get started on this on your own, so they can see I'm bringing users to the platform. It'll definitely help my channel in the long run, and Snyk is the pretty much reason why I decided to finally do this whole video series, so I can show you how to install it, right? And we're going to do more with them in the future, but let's get away from securing code and let's do something fun. Let's add a feature to this endpoint, right? So we're going back more into Copilot, and I want to add a route to delete a user VPN. So I'm going to do get, we'll do admin VPN delete, and let's just say this is going to be delete admin VPN. So we created this function. Let's just see exactly how much Copilot helps us to get you sold on using this. So we have how we do this is, let's see. I probably should delete admin VPN. how do I specify parameters? That's what I really want to do. So we do admin VPN router. Then it calls regenerate user. So let's see. Let's just do public function delete admin VPN. Is that what we called it? And we'll pass it the router. And I guess router is going to be where we get all the functions from, right? That's what we call delete admin VPN. So let's say if, why did Copilot not help us right there? There we go. I guess it was just thinking. So it's making sure we're logged in, making sure we're an admin. And now it's going to, let's see, content type, making sure we're JSON encoded. Do we have to now say body PHP input? Is it going to know to get username? JSON decode. Username is equal. There we go. It wants us to remove this. That's fine. I'm going to give it a comment, say delete the VPN for username. Is it going to do it? Shell exec. That is definitely not what it should have done, because I don't think there is a del.sh and VPN. Let's double check that. Source find.grep del.sh. No. In VPN, we only have gen.sh. So maybe our mistake is we expected the AI to know how to go from username to file name. So we're going to get rid of this and say file name is equal to, there we go. That looks better. And maybe delete the file name and see if it does anything. We want to start with if the file exists, then unlink. So we can kind of see the benefits to this already, right? This code probably doesn't work. We probably have to spend a little bit of time debugging it. AI definitely very confident when it's incorrect, but still, it gives you a lot of the functions that you can just work with. Like I may have Googled how to delete a file in PHP, and it tells me unlink. So I know enough to get started, right? So hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. Again, can't urge you enough. Please go to snyk.co/ipsec. And that's going to conclude the video on setting up your Visual Studio Code with Copilot and Snyk. Hope you guys enjoyed it. If you want more in this video series, I plan on releasing one video per week until I decide I'm happy with it. But I do have draft videos up for the paying members of my channel. Right now, you can see a early copy of this. I decided to re-record this to add some clarification pieces and extend the length, as I think we're past 20 minutes by now. But I also have configuring Burp Suite and Firefox, where we go into dark mode so this isn't so bright. Also, it's got a lot of Jinja 2 templating, and then we talk about configuring IP tables UFW logging along with Audit D. So definitely a lot more in this. If you want access to that right now, you can click join, and either the $2.99 or $9.99 a month one will get you access to both of these. But again, I plan on releasing these in the coming weeks for free. And also you can leave me comments with what you want to see in these videos. So take care, guys, and I'll see you all next time.